Good morning, Lynn. I'm just checking if you can hear me okay. Looks like you're muted.
We can hear you.
Okay, great. Thank you, Heather.
You're welcome.
Okay, I'm sorry, I didn't realize I was muted. Yes, we can hear you.
All right, great. Good morning.
Good morning. Ellen?
Yes.
And this will be recorded. So where will that be where we can get to it to share?
I will email that to you after the last session today.
Okay,
I'll
perfect.
send you both of them.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
Yeah. All right, I know it's 9 o'clock, but I will give just a few more minutes for other people to join here and
Okay,
we'll get
thank
started.
you.
All right, we'll go ahead and get started here. So my name is Ellen. I am one of the trainers here at Newline. My background, however, is education. So I was a teacher for 5 years before I joined the team at Newline. So everything I talk about is going to relate to the classroom situations. You know, if you have questions, I will give my honest opinion of how I would handle things in the classroom as well. Now, just a couple of things. This session is going to be recorded. I will pass this on to Lynn afterwards so she can distribute and you can check out this video, as well as I'll send some YouTube videos, some links, some PDFs, things like that to help you. And they just reiterate some of the things that I'm going to talk about today. Now, if you have any questions, feel free to enter those into the chat. I'll check those every once in a while. Or if you feel comfortable, go ahead and come off mute and ask those as well. So right now, what we are looking at is the home screen of the panel. And you'll see on the right side, we have this diagram, and then the left side, we have these 6 tiles. Now, if you are thinking my panel doesn't look like that, probably the colors, I just have this set on the fun and colorful theme. I will show you towards the end how you can change that out from kind of the black or the kind of gray tones that we have there. So as far as the diagram on the right side, this is going to be really helpful for you when you are connecting devices to the panel. So most functionality you're going to get is coming from using a computer with a panel. Now, that computer can be the onboard computer that you guys have, the one that little slides into the back here, but also for your own computer as well. Now, if you do connect your own computer to the panel, which it sounds like you guys have done so far, what you're going to do is you're going to take two cables. You're going to use an HDMI and a USB cable. Now, it's important that you have both of those. Again, HDMI and USB. HDMI is going to give you video and sound, and then that USB cable is going to give you touch from your computer to the panel. Now, when you plug those in, and I apologize, I can't move my camera over here without making everyone seasick, but on the back side, you'll see that there is a port for HDMI 1 and a port for HDMI 2. When you plug in your HDMI cable there, right above it is going to say touch. That's where you're going to plug in your USB cable. They need to be kind of bunched together so the computer can communicate with the panel effectively. Now, when you connect those to the panel, what's going to happen is your sources on the outside are going to light up in white. So for example, if I had a computer plugged into HDMI 2, that would be white. Now, to determine if that is the correct device, I would actually just touch on the button that is white, and mine says built-in PC, but same concept, where I touch on my source and it now gives me a live preview of my device. From here, if I want to move over to my computer, I can touch on the center and you'll see that it will switch for me automatically. So again, that is going to be helpful when you have more than one device plugged into the panel, perhaps a student device, your own laptop. That is helpful for you. But I will give my kind of honest opinion on that in the fact that it does take a little bit of time. You know, I'm pressing 2 or 3 buttons and I'm waiting. I don't have a lot of time in the classroom. And so what's helpful is over on the side where it says Windows, it is set up for that onboard computer that you have, the little slot PC. So if I touch on Windows, you'll see that it will automatically switch for me. Now, if you wanted to create a shortcut to, let's say, HDMI 2, rather than using this diagram, down at the bottom left, it says Add. This is where you can create a shortcut. So here, that first purple tab, I can create a shortcut for HDMI 2 where I just touch on it, and now I've got my shortcut down at the bottom. Just helps make things a little bit faster for you to be able to switch between your different computers that you have access to. So again, that is if you're hardwiring a device into the panel. Again, I want to reiterate, you need an HDMI and a USB cable, and they need to be plugged in close to each other, either in the back of the panel, or there's a little door in the front here if you wanted to as well. Now, there is wireless casting capability as well. So you'll see that there is this screen sharing button. So if I touch on here, it's going to launch an application that we have that's called Newlinecast. And Newlinecast allows for really any device to be able to cast onto the panel without any cables. So examples of devices, you know, your Windows devices, your Chromebooks, your tablets, your phones, MacBooks, all of those can communicate with the panel wirelessly. Now, I'm going to demonstrate with a Chromebook, but again, you can use any device here. So from my Chromebook, I'm going to follow just the steps that are on the screen. The first one asks me either to open up the Display Note app or to use the URL. Now, I'm going to use the URL on my Chromebook, but for other devices like Windows devices or your tablets or your phones, I do recommend the Display Note app. When you look it up in the App Store, it's going to be the letter D and the letter N. There's going to be a couple of options, but again, it's going to be the one with the icon that says the letter D and N. And from your computers, you can always visit this URL and it'll ask you if you want to download the app. But again, I'm going to visit this URL on my Chromebook and I'm going to enter in the session ID. Now the session ID, it is going to change each new session that you start. So just be mindful of that every day when you come in, it's going to be a new code for you. So here you can see on the side that my name is presented here, and it is connecting. So once it says connected, it means that it's ready to go. So once I have my devices listed and I'm ready to have one present, I just touch on the device and then I select invite to present. Now on my Chromebook, I know you can't read that, but there's a little pop-up that says someone has asked you to share your screen. Do you approve? So I'm going to select that I want to share my screen. And now you can see that I can cast that content up onto the panel wirelessly. Now, I am currently casting just one device at a time. However, you do have the capability to cast up to 4 devices at one time. Now, I only have the one Chromebook available, so unfortunately I can't show you what that looks like, but I can show you kind of the steps here. So to be able to have more than one device cast at one time, you'll have to enable this grid view. Now, if you are possibly looking at your panel right now or just thinking, I've never seen that button, it's something that you need to enable that's part of Moderator Mode. Moderator Mode makes it so that you as a teacher have to invite each device to present. No one can just cast up onto the panel whenever they feel like it. So to enable that, down at the bottom left where it says settings, you'll see a tab that says moderator. And once you select on that, it's probably going to say off. You're going to want to go ahead and turn that on or enable it. And once you do that, you'll see that you have grid view. And when I touch on that, you'll see that if I have multiple devices connected, it's going to allow up to 40 devices to be in the queue, but it will only list the first 4. So just, again, be mindful of that. So if I have 4 devices here, I can select invite on all of them. Those devices the students have are going to have a little pop-up that says someone has asked them to share their screen, and then they can cast from there. Now, I have said a couple of times, students casting their content onto the panel. So in my opinion, and just my thoughts on the classroom, I would probably use the casting more for students rather than my device as a teacher. And just because wireless casting, it relies on the internet and the cloud to be able to work. And a lot of the activity that you do on your computer is very robust. You're doing a lot of different tabs and things like that at one time, that you're probably going to get a better connection if you're hardwired into the panel with cables. Whereas a student, they have a Google presentation that they just want to, share quickly up onto the panel where they don't need to be connected all day long. So again, that is my opinion. However, if you want to be able to wirelessly cast the whole day, by all means, go ahead and do that. If you do have a Windows device and you're wirelessly casting, you will have bidirectional touch. So you can leave your computer in the back of the classroom and come up to the panel and manipulate it. That's just going to be for a Windows device. Things like Chromebooks, they don't have bidirectional touch. So that means everything would have to be managed from the computer level. The Chromebook, they'd have to, swipe to the next slide if they need to. So that is Newlinecast. Now, when I was on site on Tuesday, some of the teachers were mentioning that when they go to connect, that it was presenting them with a 10-digit code. Occasionally when I open it up, it pulls the 10-digit code. It's switching between my local network and using the cloud. So just a suggestion here is to select that new session and it should generate a 6-digit code for you. If you've done that a couple of times and it still hasn't happened, feel free to email me and we can try and troubleshoot that. I'm going to pause here, see if there's any questions on connecting a device here, whether that's hardwired or casting. All right, looks like we're good still. All right, so next to the screen sharing button, we have the whiteboard. Now, the whiteboard that I'm going to show you is going to be our newest whiteboard. Now, if you have been using your panel for a little bit, you are probably using what we call our classic whiteboard. It's the whiteboard that we had for years with the RS series, but we have recently updated it. Now, just to point some things out, to be able to have the new whiteboard, you're going to want to make sure that your panel is up to date. So if you have turned on your panel and you get a pop-up that says it's time to update, go ahead and wait to the end of the day, but update your panel. You want to make sure that you're on the latest update, so any of the improvements to possible bugs or things like that are improved and better for you. It also will give you this new whiteboard. Now, to be able to switch between the classic whiteboard you have and the new whiteboard, you're going to go to the settings in the top right-hand corner. It's a little wheel. And then there is going to be an option for whiteboard. And you'll touch on whiteboard and it will have classic version, which you're probably on, and you'll just want to go ahead and switch that to the new version. Once you switch that once, you'll never have to worry about that again. Now, here I'm going to go ahead and open up this whiteboard. Now, the whiteboard that you have is actually going to be a whiteboard rather than blue or anything like that. However, I have changed the default here just because my camera goes crazy on a white screen. But I want to point out that you do have the capability to change the background. So you can change it temporarily by holding down on this plus sign. So if I do a long press here, you'll see I get color options as well as pattern. So just a couple of examples. We have grid paper. There is lined paper. Got like a grid view, handwriting paper, and then there's sheet music, and then there's also, for any coaches out there, there's baseball diamonds, basketball court, soccer fields, football fields as well. So just some ideas there. This is also letter recognition, skip counting, angles, kind of some math tools and literacy as well. And so that is how you can temporarily change the background. If you want to change the defaults entirely, you know, every time you open up the whiteboard, if you want it to be this football field, down at the bottom right, you'll see that it has a little settings wheel and it says default settings. Here you can pick that background. You can also pick the default pen and highlighter that you'd like to use as well. So again, the plus sign is to change the background temporarily, and then the settings wheel in the bottom right is to change the default. So every time you open it, it's going to be whatever you've selected. And I'm going to pause real quick. I did see that a question popped up here. There was a question, where would you go to force an update at the end of the day? So you might find that you are updated. So if a pop-up comes up that asks, you know, are you up, you know, to update your panel, if you defer and there's an update waiting, right here next to this little thumb drive is going to be a red exclamation point, and you can touch on that and it will ask you to update from there. So hopefully that helps there. How can I check for the most recent version of the software the panel should be running? So we don't have that anywhere posted, but as long as you have an internet connection on the panel, they are over-the-air updates, which actually prompts me to something that I saw on site on Tuesday. So to make sure that you have an internet connection on the panel and you're getting those updates, on the back's left side, there is going to be a little thumb drive. It's white. We call it a Wi-Fi dongle, and it's going to give you Wi-Fi connection on the panel. You will want to make sure that that is plugged in to the USB 2.0 embedded port. The embedded port is where you're going to get internet connection or Wi-Fi on it, rather than the ports that say USB 3.0. Those are going to be, you know, things like your document cameras and things like that. So just something to point out, and that will help make sure that you're connected to the internet and we'll get those updates as well. All right, so I'm going to pop back into the whiteboard here. So I'm going to go ahead and just move back to the first slide that I have, just using these arrows here. Now, with our panels, we have something called object recognition, where the panel has a sensor in it that recognizes the sizes of different objects. So to write on my panel here, I am going to take the thin tip of the stylus. Now, I typically use a mechanical pencil with the panel. You can use anything plastic or wood, you know, a mechanical pencil, no lead, chopstick, golf tee. I've even used a tennis ball for some students who don't want to, you know, grip a stylus. Now, when I take that thin tipped object, whatever it is, I can walk up to the panel and I can immediately start to annotate. You'll see that I didn't have to actually select on the pen to be able to write. Now, if I want to erase, I just take the back of my hand, drag it across, and it will erase from there. Now, if I find that I just want to erase part of the word or part, you know, just the part I made a mistake on, not everything, you can touch on the eraser that's at the bottom, and there will be a pixel eraser. So it just erases, and let me get there, part of whatever you need, not the whole word or whatever that content is. Now, next to that eraser, there is a clear all. Looks like a screen with an eraser on it where you can select clear and it'll get rid of everything. Now, also with the object recognition, the panel also has an infinite canvas. So if I take an object that's between the size of the thin stylus and the back of my hand, like my finger, easiest one for me to find, I can turn this into an infinite canvas. So I just touch and I see those grid lines, and now I can move this all over the whiteboard here. And then, you know, if I do have a lot of content and I want to bring everything back in, I can take two fingers and I can do a pinch to zoom in and out for those objects as well. Now, with this object recognition, it is designated on the panel where if I need to write, I have to use a thin stylus. If I want to be able to move around this infinite canvas, I have to use my finger. There's the way it's set right now, I can't use my finger to annotate. Now, to change that, which I do recommend doing because a lot of times students are using their fingers, is in the bottom right, that settings wheel again, it says object recognition, write with fine pen only, which is what I'm on and all of you are going to be set on right away. But underneath that, it says write with fine pen or finger. I'm going to go ahead and switch that. And now you'll see that I can write with my finger or I can write with the stylus. If I do that and I need to enable the infinite canvas, down at the bottom left, there is that little navigation tool, and I can touch on that, and now I can move my canvas around. So again, just a setting that you can or cannot adjust, whatever you'd like to do there, that gives you the ability to write with your finger or your stylus. Now, when I wrote with my finger and the stylus at the same time, it had the two different colors pop up at the same time. So this gives the ability for more than one student to interact with the panel. The panel does have 20 points of touch, so you can get everybody up there. Probably not quite yet, but it's someday. But if I want to change those colors out, I take a thin tipped object and I'll touch on my pen, and I'm going to find a fun color here. All right, we'll go with some aqua there. So my stylus is that aqua color, but then with the thicker object, which is going to be my finger, I touch on the pen again, and this time we'll go with purple and take a little bit thicker there. Now I can annotate with both of those at the same time. So gives the ability, again, for more than one student to be able to interact with the panel at the same time. Now across the bottom, some of those other tools, you do have a highlighter. There is the shapes tool. So it's just some built-in shapes that you have. There's also a lasso. This lasso is going to allow for you to move your content around. So this squiggly line that looks like waves, if I wanted to move that, I touch on that lasso and just circle it. And now I can move that around. I can also change out the color if I want to, whatever that would be. And then I can copy it, cut, kind of the typical things you can do with your objects there. Now, one other thing I wanted to mention as far as the annotation goes, and just one kind of little teacher trick here. So if I have a thin tipped object, again, I'm going to go with, you know, this, not blue on blue, that would be hard to see, this coral color. And then my thicker object, again, I'm going to pick with my finger here. We'll go with green. And there we go. Now, if you have the stylus that comes with the panel, one thing you can do is take the thin tipped object and, you know, let's say you're writing the math problem here, but then you want to solve it. You can just flip the stylus around that you have and solve it in a different color. So just a visual aid for students. It can be used lots of different ways there. Again, that's going to be the stylus that comes with the panel because one end is a little bit bigger than the other. Now, a couple other things that you can add to the whiteboard. So over on the left side, you'll see these 3 dots. And if I touch on those, this gives me the ability to add in an image, text, sticky notes, a PDF document. I can also do a Google image search, or I can search Google in general. I'm going to add in a couple of images just to give you an idea. So here, this image, and we're going to ignore all of this. This image that I'm going to bring in is going to be from my Google Drive. So up here at the top left, you'll see the little hamburger. And then it says File Commander at the bottom. The panel is going to label the File Commander FC occasionally. But when you see that, just think of either your Google Drive or your OneDrive. I understand you use both, but just think of that in your head and where all your files are saved. So here where it says add a cloud account, I would recommend that you log into either your Google Drive or your OneDrive, whichever one you use more, just because it allows for you to add content to it and open it up in this whiteboard. So again, I mentioned I want to add an image, and I already have my Google Drive connected. So I'm going to walk through here and go to my images folder, and I'll go ahead and bring in an image from there. So again, this image came from my Google Drive. It could be OneDrive that I've already logged into the panel and be able to use. This is separate than if I'm using my computer. So again, everything, I'm logging into the panel's drive, the access there. Now, once I add in that image, it's going to be kind of the typical image formatting that you're used to. You know, if I touch the center, it's going to move it around. If I want to make it larger, I can hold on to the corner, or if you want to, you can use 2 fingers to zoom in and out. But then at the bottom, you have your copy, cut, crop, lock in place, kind of those standard operations you've got there. Now, if you do not have images already saved in your drive and you can't just pull those up, there is the search image tool. So if I wanted to search for a bear here, it will populate just image options for me. No text, just images. So I'll go with this one. Just touch on it, and then you can drag it in, and it will add it to your whiteboard as well. And you can see if you wanted to, down at the bottom, you can overlay them however you want to as well. And then lastly, as far as the whiteboard goes, at the top on those 3 dots, there is the option for a canvas where I can split the whiteboard into 3 different zones. So you could have 3 different students interacting with their own little piece of the whiteboard at the same time. So here if I touch Canvas and it says split mode, and I know it's going to be very faint and you can hardly see the screen on the side, but there is a line down the center here, it's gray, where I can then have student on the left pick their color, student on the right pick their color, and they can interact at the same time. The tool there doesn't matter, they can use their finger or a stylus. But if you wanted to introduce another student or just have some space in the middle, those 3 dots at the top left, you can do a 3 split, and I can switch it into these 3 zones here as well. And then again, they can do the same colors or they can split. That line makes it so they cannot write into each other's space as much as they can. Now, if you want to keep this content, you can take a screenshot of it. So you'll see at the top left that, again, those 3 dots, there's a screenshot option. And if I touch on that, I can adjust the size of it by touching on the corners here. I also have the expand button at the bottom left if I wanted to do full screen. But then in the middle, there's 2 other options. One has an image of a whiteboard with 2 squares. That's going to give you the ability to copy this screenshot and paste it into your original whiteboard. You also have the down arrow. This is going to allow for you to export this screenshot to your cloud storage. So I did press on the export button and you'll see it says save with FC. Remember, again, that's OneDrive or Google Drive. And I can touch on that and then find my drive, whichever I'm using, and then walk through those folders and add my screenshot to the folder that I've created. So again, that is the 3 split that you can do on the whiteboard as well. Now, if you need to get out of this, again, those 3 dots, exit, and you can leave the split mode and come back to your original whiteboard. Now, lastly, before I open up for questions, because I know there might be a few here. So as far as saving goes, the panel is going to automatically save all of your whiteboard pages as images. And so here at the bottom left where those 3 dots are, you'll see in the middle it says file, where you can export these images, or pages. So you can export all of them, or you can select specific pages. We'll go to here, but then you can export as an image file or a PDF. If you have multiple pages that you're going to be sharing out with students, I recommend a PDF, just so you're not sending out individual images, just a little bit more time on your end. But here, if I select PDF and export, we're going to ignore the QR code for right now, but here you'll see that it says share. And then again, there's that save with FC, which is your cloud storage area. And again, you can touch through your folders and go ahead and add those specific pages or the PDF to your Google Drive, your OneDrive, and access that later on your computer if you need to. Now, one thing I want to mention, and this is the last little bit on the whiteboard. So in the bottom right, you'll see this little character. And this is if you're using Google Drive. The panel is, again, like I mentioned, integrated with, where here you can sign in to your Google Drive on the whiteboard, just on the whiteboard. And it will give you the option where when I export, instead of having to select share and then go, through the folders, it will give you an option for Google Drive. So it makes it a little bit easier to move things over. Right now, it is like you have to manually type it in, but in the near future, there's going to be an update that allows for you to scan a QR code to log in from there. So that's something kind of to look forward to on the whiteboard to make it easier to move things over. So I'm going to stop again, see if there's any questions on the whiteboard here. All right, it looks like we're good. Bring me back if we need to. So down at the bottom here, just to kind of wrap up on the embedded side of the panel. So here you have a browser, and I'm going to be honest with all of you, I would not use this day to day. I would use this as your backup plan. Anytime that you need a browser, use either your onboard computer or your connected laptop. That's going to be a lot more robust than this kind of mobile browser. So I suggest using that browser when you have no other computer or option, or you have a substitute teacher. You don't want to share a password to your computer, but you still want them to be able to access YouTube and things like that. They can do that there. Next to that is the file viewer. Now, the file viewer is where the file commander is housed. So you can see it says file commander there, but it also has that add cloud option. So if you need to, you can log into your cloud account here as well. Now, the file viewer is where all of your pictures automatically get housed. So if I scroll down here on the side, you'll see pictures and then all of my whiteboard pages here. Now, if they get put here before you get a chance to move them over to your drive, you forget. Each one of these images has a little snowman next to it, the 3 little dots, where you can touch on it and select share and move this over to your drive with that save FC. Now you can do that individually, or you can touch on multiple image names. Touch on the image name, not the actual image, it'll open it up. Or if you needed everything moved over, if you touch on 1 or 2, then in the far right, that blue menu where I've got the skinny snowman, I can select all. And next to that, at the top right, it's like the 3 dots with the lines. I don't know what they call that, but the share button where I can touch on that and again, share all of those over to my cloud storage. Or if you just need to simply delete all of them, there is the trash can here where you can delete them. Now, there was a question, will all of those pages you have in there slow down the panel? They won't. I have never witnessed that. Also, the panel is automatically set up to erase whiteboard pages or screenshots that are 60 days old. So you really won't have to worry about, it slowing down the panel in any way. Lastly, because I am connected to my cloud storage on the panel, I do have the ability to open up content like slides, PowerPoints, PDFs, things like that. However, I want to just point out what that looks like on the panel, because I always say this is also my backup plan. I'm going to open up what was once a slide, and you'll just see the format here is a lot different than what we're used to. So I, again, always recommend this as a backup plan. You have no computer and you need to be able to open up content rather than your go-to. So that, again, is accessible through the file viewer there. Lastly, we have the gadgets folder. And I'll be honest, I don't see teachers using these a ton of the time. And I have a couple on here that shouldn't be, so ignore Starfall there. But some of the things that you have here, you do have a music button, so you could upload music to the panel. Or what might be a little bit simpler is just to listen to it off of your computer. There is a calculator built in. But then lastly, there is an application that I do suggest teachers use. It's called Newline Broadcast. And what Newline Broadcast does is it allows you as the teacher to cast your panel onto individual devices. So, everyone has to be 6 feet apart from each other, including, you and as a teacher in the front. If you have a student that has trouble seeing the panel, what they can do is just grab a device that has a browser, it could be their phone, whatever they're allowed to have that has that browser. And you as a teacher, what you'll do is you'll start up your broadcast, and it's going to give the student a URL to visit. That URL is never going to change, but then it'll give them a broadcast ID. that is going to be entered into that student device as well on that URL. Once they connect, everything that you display on the panel, they will see on their device. Now, it is just meant as a visual aid. It has no audio. It does not give them the ability to manipulate. They can just see it on their device. Now, when you get off of here, you'll see in the bottom right, I have just this little broadcast tab. Now, when I'm broadcasting, I truly mean anything that's on the panel. So if I have my computer plugged into the panel and it's displayed here, students would see my PowerPoint or my Google Slide, not just built-in features of the panel. Now, to tell if you are live or not, you'll see that on that little tab, kind of like the Wi-Fi symbol, it will be orange. That means you're sharing everything on the other end. If I stop my broadcast here, it will turn it white. So that means I'm not live, I'm not sharing content with students. And you can just use that tab to open it up and close it again. So, if a student's late and they need that code, I can just touch on that and it will give them this information again. And this will allow up to 200 devices to connect and view at the same time. So I'm assuming you guys will be safe on the number of students there. So I will pause again. Those are kind of the main buttons here on the panel before I proceed to next little content here. All right, so there was a question, is there still the screenshot option that's on the side in blue? Yes, there is, and I will talk about that one in just a few minutes. What is the amount of storage on the panel? There's a lot. I think it's 16 gigs, so it should be okay as far as all of those images. And again, they delete after 60 days. Does the broadcast code change? Yes, each new session that you start, the broadcast session will change. So here, if I bring it up and I'll go ahead and start and you'll see the code there. Now, if I just keep it running and you see here on the side and I start it back up, it's going to be the same because I haven't ended my session. But if I stop the broadcast and restart it, it's going to generate a new code. So just be mindful of that. If it's one group that you have the whole day, you can just keep it for them, or depending on how you want to handle things there. All right, so we'll keep on going here. And so I am now going to switch over to my computer and share with you a couple of tools that you can use both in the panel and on your computer. So the computer I'm using is that onboard computer. Now, something just kind of my thoughts on the onboard computer that you guys all have. It is a very nice tool to have just because it keeps your instructional content separate than your personal things like grades, attendance, that kind of thing. So if you like to separate the two on your devices, by all means, go ahead and just use that onboard computer. But I'm going to select Windows here, and it's going to go to my onboard computer. Now, I'm going to go ahead and just start by opening up Google here, and we'll go to Starfall. So the content here does not matter. It could be that I'm showing this website. It could be my PowerPoint, my slides, anything that I have up here on the panel. I'm going to have the ability to annotate over with the side toolbar that was mentioned. So here, I'm just going to go ahead and go through. Now, as far as volume goes, before I get to that side button, so down at the bottom here, the little door, you have a volume button. You also have a remote. Now, what's important about that remote is that you point it at the sensor here. So in the bottom right by that power button is going to be your sensor where you're going to want to point that remote. If you use it like your home remote where you just like throw it at the wall, to work, it doesn't work like that. The sensor is going to be there and it's pretty sensitive. So definitely point it that way. Now, as far as that annotation tool that I mentioned, I activate it by using the top button on the sides of the panel. It looks like a screen with a pen. And when I touch on that, it's going to bring up my writing tools. Now my writing tools, they look a little bit different than what you're used to because I have switched to that new whiteboard. They are the same, they have the same functionality. They're basically just gray and now have a little bit different icon. So same thing. This also has that object recognition, so I can walk up and immediately start to annotate. Now, once I have this screen annotation tool activated, it makes it so the panel is a transparency and I cannot actually move these objects. I'm just writing on the transparency. Now, to make it so it is interactive for you, down in the bottom left, there's that little cursor. And if you touch on that, it temporarily disables the annotation, where then you have the ability to grab hold of whatever it is you need, those letters, or if you need to switch to a different tab, it will move those for you. Now, when I do that, it doesn't have the ink stick to the page. So that ink still stays. I can use the back of my hand to erase, or what most people like to do with this is that clear all button down at the bottom. That looks like the whiteboard with the eraser. I can select clear, and I opened up my Teams at the same time. Here we go. So that can be used there. Now, when it comes to exiting out of your screen annotation tool, you're going to exit the same way that you came in, with the screen with the pen on the side. Now, when you do that, you'll see that it takes a screenshot of the content that you have. I'm going to assume that most of you do not want that. Most of the time teachers do not. So I want to show you how you can turn that off. So down in the bottom right here, you'll see that there is the settings wheel. And if I touch on that settings wheel, you'll see that I have the option with the auto screenshot. You'll just want to toggle that off. While you're there, I do recommend turning off the action hint. You don't need to be told what to do after a couple of times. So here, if I turn that off, now when I exit with that screen with a pen, it doesn't take a screenshot. Now, you obviously want to take a screenshot of some content. So to be able to take a screenshot of some of that, what you'll do is this camera down at the bottom right. If I touch on that, now I have that screenshot option I had with that split whiteboard, where I can adjust the size, whether that's full screen or not. I can copy this screenshot and paste it into the whiteboard. Or again, I can export to the file commander or my cloud storage. So again, you have either option there. Now, if you have decided to stick with the classic whiteboard and you want to be able to turn off that screen annotation tool, over on, I believe it's the left side, there's going to be a camera option or a screenshot option. That camera, do a long press on that one and you'll get a pop-up that says, you know, do you want to take a screenshot? Just select no, and then it will turn off that auto screenshot as well. And again, that information will also be in the quick start guide and the PDF that I send out as well. So just going to see if there's any questions on that. All right. So lastly, just kind of rounding out here. And so I understand that some of you use PowerPoint, Word, Excel, all of those as well, kind of in the office environment. So I just wanted to point out some of the great tools that Office has that work really well with our panels. So here I'm going to open up a PowerPoint. Here we go. A PowerPoint here. So within the Office products, as I mentioned, they have some annotation tools that are actually built into the products. It's not something where you have to use like the screen annotation tools on the side. So here, if I just switch to a different slide here, I can take my thin stylus and I can walk up and immediately start to annotate on my PowerPoint. When I do that, you'll see that the draw tools within PowerPoint automatically switch over. So here, I'm going to pick a different color. So here you've got some options as far as those pens go. For colors and thicknesses, they have glitter pens that I like to use that you can be able to annotate as well. If I need to erase, again, I just take the back of my hand, drag it across, and it will erase. But if I have text or images that I want to move around, I again just take my finger, touch on that, and I can move it from there. Now this is obviously in edit mode. If I do put this into presentation mode, I have annotation tools to use as well. So again, take my thin stylus and just start writing. Now if I want to move to the next slide, I just take my finger and I can swipe and keep on annotating. Now, when you're in presentation mode and you need to erase, I recommend when you use the back of your hand, start from the top and go down. Occasionally, I experience where if I kind of do left to right, it moves to the next slide. So just a little pointer there. Now, once you're all done marking up your PowerPoint, you're done with your lesson, you can touch on the side here and you'll see that I get these 7 circles that pop up. Those are a part of PowerPoint again. The bottom button is a screen with an X. That's going to allow for me to get out of presentation mode. And you'll see that there's a little pop-up that says, do you want to keep your ink annotations? If I want to, I can select yes. And then the writing from presentation mode is now here in edit mode. And you can save a copy of this if you want to with the annotations. So you've got File, Save As, and you can create a new copy of it with the writing. That's not going to affect your original document. But if you need to erase these, you still have that option, you know, to come through if you need to use it for another class. So again, this is just reiterating that within the Office products, so PowerPoint, Word, and Excel, you have the capability of using their actual writing tools to be able to annotate on your content. This is different than the screen or the side toolbars there. So this is specific to the Office products, things like Google Slides and just the Google environment. They aren't as friendly with having annotation tools built in. So that is a time in which you would use those side toolbars for your Google content there. I'm just going to again check if there's any questions on kind of using Office products here. So it says my Newline does not have Microsoft Office products on it. How do I go about adding that? So that would be a part of something that you, I think from your district, we don't provide anything as far as Office goes. That would probably either be on your computer that you have that you connect or that onboard computer. I unfortunately cannot answer how to get that from the Newline side. Oh, got it. Okay. All right, so Lynn and Heather, that was a question for you guys. So do you have a suggestion for an extension that would work well in Chrome for annotation? And so one suggestion I have as far as being able to annotate over my Chrome content in the browser, there we go. So I actually have, and let me go to, I'll just go to a new website. So as an extension, one that I recommend that you can use, it's called Page Marker. It's not fully robust, but it gets the job done. So again, it's called Page Marker, and it looks like a little highlighter that I have in the top right here, where I can touch on that and pick my color and my tool, and then I can annotate. Then I have the cursor again where I can touch on that, and then I can scroll, and that ink is going to stick. So here, can annotate, switch through, and again, that writing is going to stay. It does give you the option to download an image of that writing if you want to as well. So Page Marker is kind of weird when it comes to actual Google content, like slides. Google doesn't give them permission to be able to use those simultaneously. So it's just something to kind of note there. But I enjoy using that one. That is a good one to use. Also, I mentioned this with the group that I was on site with. Someone mentioned Google Jamboard, and I'll just keep on mentioning it if that's okay. But Google Jamboard is Google's whiteboard. It's their cloud-hosted whiteboard. It can be used on your computer as well that's connected to the panel. And I'll just go ahead and access this here. So it's available in the little waffle that Google has. I'll go ahead and open up here. And here you can see I have a couple of whiteboards, or Jamboards is what they call them, already created. Now some of these I actually got from Teachers Pay Teachers. I got the free version, so you can look for some pre-created things. But just to give you an idea how it operates is the plus sign at the bottom right. I'm going to open up a new Jamboard. And this is, you can see at the top, I can relabel the Jamboard. I can change the background. I'll be honest, it's very limited in the options as far as the background goes. It's a little tiny too, but you do have some options there. And I'm going to change to blue. That'll hopefully give you guys a better view there. But over on the left side, I have a couple of tools I can use. So I've got my writing tool. So can annotate. Again, it's a freehand annotation. My eraser, we know how that one works. We've got a cursor. There's also sticky notes. So here, if I wanted to have one on the directions or use this at some type of exit ticket for students, you can have that. And you can drag the corners. It'll make it larger if you need to. I feel like I spelled that wrong. I think I'm good. You look at it enough, you think you spell things wrong. There's also the insert image button. And here you can touch on this and you can do a Google image search for content. You can look at your Google Drive as well to bring up images. Now, the reason I kind of brought up Jamboard, you know, there was a question about writing over Chrome things, but also one thing you can do is, because Google Slides doesn't have an annotation tool built into it, you know, you can use the tools built into the panel, but if you want specific tools that are cloud hosted by Google, one recommendation that I have is to actually take either, you know, your PowerPoints or your slides and save those as images and open them up into Google Jamboard so you can freehand annotate on those. So I'm going to show you how to do that quickly on the panel, but you would do that, you know, on your computer prior to the lesson. So I'm going to go ahead and just open up my drive here. And here I have a slide. And I'm going to pick, we'll just go with the first one here, but I'm going to select File and Download. And then I'm going to download this as an image. And you'll see it pop up in the bottom here where it'll give me my image. And I'm going to go to the far right where I can save this. And we'll just save as, we'll just keep it as the same name here. I'll add it to my Google Drive, but it could be saved locally to the panel and retrieved as well. But I'll go ahead and save that image. Now, after I've saved that slide as an image, I'm going to go back to Google Jamboard and go to that Insert Image button. Actually, before I do that, I'm going to create a new page. So here at the top, I have that arrow where I can add in a new frame. Now I'll select Image, and I'm just going to go to Recent because that is usually where I can find it. And here I'll touch on the image and add it in from here. Once you do that, it is an image that you can adjust the size on here, make it full page, whatever you need there. But then if I want to annotate, I can just touch on the annotation tool, and again, I can freehand and write on it. So again, it's kind of a process to move things from slide to Jamboard to be able to freehand annotate on it, but it is an option. Jamboard can also, I know you guys are using Google Classroom, this also can be shared with students through that if you want them to be able to see or to work on their own there as well. And lastly, just to wrap up, there is the Shapes tool. So here I can grab the circle, I can fill it in up here at the top. There is the text button if you need to. Some teachers have mentioned that this makes it, the text box is a little bit easier for students that are maybe not in the class, you know, because they don't really have touchscreen devices necessarily. That'll give them that access. And then at the bottom, we have the laser. So the panel doesn't do well with an actual laser pointed at it, but if you need just some temporarily, just direction for students to look at, you can use that as well. So again, that is Google Jamboard, just a tool that might be helpful there. All right, so I think that Heather just answered the question there that was asked about Office. All right, so I'm gonna return back to the home screen unless there's some more questions on as far as using annotation tools on your computer. Just to wrap up and share a couple of tools and some settings here. So the time, if you actually touch on that, it's gonna give you a world clock. So here I can touch on that, compare the time to anywhere in the world. But also across the top left, I have an alarm, a timer, and a stopwatch. Those apps or those tools are all going to be similar to your phone, where they will run in the background, whether you're on this specific screen or not. It's also like your phone, where you're not going to be able to do a split between a timer and, you know, a website or anything like that. And then these light blue toolbars, I just want to go over them just to give you an idea of what's kind of going on there. So again, that screen with the pen on the very top, that is your screen annotation tool. Lets you annotate over anything that is on the panel. Underneath that is the shortcut to the whiteboard. So the icons are the same, where that looks like a little short pencil. So if I needed to get to the whiteboard, I don't have to use this button here on the home screen. I can just touch on the whiteboard tab and it'll switch. The house will bring me to the home screen. And then the arrow, if I touch on that twice, it'll bring me back out of whatever I'm in. And then at the very bottom, it says PC, and it says the same thing for you. This is a shortcut to your onboard computer. So for example, if I am on the whiteboard and I don't want to go to the home screen and then to the Windows button, or home screen, then that live preview, I can just touch on that bottom tab and it's going to switch me to my computer. Now when I'm here to get to my whiteboard, I don't want to go home and then to the whiteboard. I can just touch on that shortcut on the side and it will switch me there pretty quickly. So those tools are very helpful for you to be able to switch back and forth. Now that bottom button, it can be swapped out. So if you wanted that shortcut to be the shortcut to your computer, if you're connecting your computer to the panel, what you can do, and I will send a PDF with this, is that settings button again. You're going to have the option for toolbar, and then you'll see it says favorite connection. Your favorite connection is going to be wherever you plug in your laptop to. You do want to make it consistent because the panel can't really read your mind there. But here, for example, if I'm going to connect my computer to HDMI 2, I can select on that and touch OK. Then customize icon. You're going to want to select connection and then select OK. And you may or may not be able to see now that that bottom button has been swapped out. It no longer says PC, and it's a shortcut to HDMI 2. If I touch on that, you'll see that it says HDMI 2 now, rather than that onboard computer. So that might be something that you would want to do. You know, you have that Windows button to get you to that onboard computer as a shortcut, and you can use that side toolbar as well. whichever one you're more comfortable with. And then lastly, to wrap up, as far as some of these other settings. So I did mention the whiteboard. Again, to switch to the new one, you'll go Settings, Whiteboard, switch from Classic to New. Underneath that, we have Display and Theme. So if you like the colorful theme that I have, you'll just touch on Theme and switch from Standard to Colorful. Then we talked about Toolbar. The one other one that I want to mention, and this may or may not affect you, it depends on kind of how, if you've played around with your panel or not. But the panels have an Energy Star rating where every panel by default, if no one is actively touching the panel for 30 minutes, it automatically turns off. Now, that's going to be very frustrating when you're presenting something or doing small group. You just need people to look but not touch. So I recommend that you go into Settings and to Power, and then select Energy Saving and adjust the increment of time. So you can pick what you want. Here you'll see it says Never as well if you want to go with that. If you select Never, I do recommend that you set an auto turn off where at the end of the day it'll turn off at like 5 p.m. just to kind of conserve the panel. To do that, you just toggle over on the right side, touch on power off time, and then adjust it from there. And you can pick the specific day of the week as well as the time of the day. And you can do the same thing for an auto power on. If you don't want to touch one extra button in the morning, you can have the panel turn on its own, you know, at 7:30, whatever you need there. So that wraps up kind of hopefully some basics or give you a good idea of some ways to use the panel. I'm going to again open it up for any questions that you might have. All right, well, it looks like we are good on questions. If anything does pop up afterwards, my contact information is down at the bottom. So if you have any other questions or any kind of tools that you're thinking of, I might have some ideas that I can share with you. But after this, again, I will share this link to the video with Lynn as well as some resources that you can use as well.
And you will be back on at 1 o'clock.
Yes.
Same thing for other teachers that want to participate.
Absolutely.
Awesome.
Lynn,
Yes.
this is Robin at North Corbin. We recently bought like 9 and we had already like 6 of these. And I found that when I would go in the classrooms that when you bring up the browser, the built-in PC or the other, they don't have the keyboard option that shows up down at the bottom bar. And when you click like to type something in to the browser, like, you know, like you want to search for something on Google. So I searched and searched and I found that if you hook up a mouse or a keyboard to the front of the panel with the USB and you right click on the bottom taskbar, there's a place that says show the keyboard, show onboard keyboard, and it'll put that little icon at the bottom, but it took a lot of digging to find it. So maybe that'll help somebody.
Okay. And Ellen, is there another way that they could go about getting that keyboard without having to go through all that?
So I'm curious about the kind of like the first login screen because that should pop up.
It does. It does with the login. It's when you go to the built-in PC and you want to type something in the browser. And
okay.
Like you click on the Google bar and you want to type something in, the keyboard does not pop up at the bottom.
Yes. Okay. So one way, if you do get to this page, sorry, I misunderstood. So down at the bottom, to do a right click on the panel, you're going to do a touch and hold. So you can see just no space, no icons, anything, just like you did with an actual keyboard. But here, I just do a long press and release, and then it will say Show Touch Keyboard button here.
And you have to, yeah, you have to select that Show Touch Keyboard for it to,
Yeah.
for you to have the little keyboard at the bottom. That was
Yeah.
just one of our little issues we ran into.
Okay, but if you, for now, you shouldn't have to connect another keyboard or anything, or a mouse to do it. You can do that manually if you want to on the panel.
Thank you.
Thank
Yeah.
you.
All right. Sounds like we're good. All right, again, thank you for joining me. Lynn, I will send this recording to you, and maybe I'll see some of you at 1 o'clock as well.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Ellen.
You're welcome.